Sonic the Hedgehog, the fastest thing alive. In the 90s, he was the talk of the gaming world, being the little blue blur going super fast on our Sega Genesis. He was the mascot for Sega and their game consoles trying to take down Nintendo. Sonic has not only had many great video games, but he was so popular he crossed over into other media, mainly movies and cartoons, which is what we're looking at today. The show we're looking at is Sonic X, one of the best and most popular Sonic cartoons. This was an anime made in Japan in 2003, and it gave so many great interpretations of the Sonic characters, creating definitive versions recognized by people not familiar with Sonic. Sonic X was localized by 4Kids Entertainment, who have had a reputation when it comes to anime. Instead of just straight dubbing the animes they acquire, they went to great lengths to heavily edit and change things about the animes they showed. Everyone on the internet has made fun of these guys at some point, but to be fair to them, they were just trying to cut out the more risque elements of animes so kids could watch. Plus, if it wasn't for them, anime wouldn't be as popular in the US as it is right now. The shows they brought over did introduce a lot of people to Japanese cartoons. The storyline I want to talk about, though, features my favorite and probably everyone's favorite character, Shadow the Hedgehog, our favorite edgelord. Created as the dark counterpart of Sonic, Shadow was the main antagonist of Sonic Adventure 2, one of the best Sonic games. This was because that game was one of the first Sonic games with an in-depth story, and it was a very engaging one. Yeah, the original cutscenes and voice acting, at least on the English side, was hit or miss, but people still remember the story years and years later. That's because when it came out, it was thought to be the swan song for Sonic. It was the last game released on the Sega Dreamcast, a great console but up against stiff competition, the Xbox, the GameCube, and oh yeah, the PlayStation 2. To this day, still the most successful game console. So after that, Sega dropped out of the console war, so it was unknown if Sonic would continue. That made the game more special, however, because it really felt like so much love was put into possibly the very last Sonic game, and thankfully it wasn't the end. Sega instead decided to focus on game development for Sonic, so they released Sonic Adventure 2 on the GameCube, allowing even more people to play it. They adapted the story into Sonic X just like they had done before with Sonic Adventure 1 with the Chaos Saga, and it was glorious. I mean, I'll be the first to say the animation of Sonic X is not the best, but for what money they had, they did a lot. This is what we're looking at today, going over the 6 episodes in Season 2 of Sonic X, the ones that depict the Shadow storyline. With all that said, I'm Rocko from Reamlore, and let's dive in. By the way, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe because we upload videos just like this one on our Reamlore channel. Season 2, Episode 7. After a brief recap of the Chaos Saga and the super catchy Sonic X theme song, we open with Sonic racing through the destroyed remains of the city that Chaos trashed. More fallout from the previous saga as we see everything getting cleaned up and repaired. Sonic and his friends are helping out as we meet the President, voiced by Ted Lewis, talking about how he wishes he could help people like Sonic. Ted Lewis is most well known for voicing Bakura and Jack Atlas from Yu-Gi-Oh! His assistant tells him there is a group of scientists building robots to counter Eggman, and that he's getting a new driver called Sam Speed. We then meet Chris, played by Suzanne Goldish, who is one of the most cookie-cutter characters in Sonic's history. He's a young boy Sonic and his friends befriended that acts as their middleman to the real world. He's a lot like Bella from the Twilight books, a blank slate so other kids can put their personalities onto him. Really, if you cut him out of the show, not much changes. And I don't want to be that guy, but he can be a little bit annoying because he's super pouty during this whole arc. Chris does almost nothing in the series except needing to be rescued, unlike the other human characters who have cool moments or contribute in some way. The way to fix Chris in the show is to give him something to contribute to make him more likable. Make him a scientist to help out the team in the lab, or an ace pilot who can fly Tails' plane when they need it, or give him the ability to find and connect to the Chaos Emeralds. Just something to involve him in the plot more. Anyway, Chris and some of the minor characters from Season 1 are moving to a new place so Chris's dad can fix up their house, which got flooded because of chaos. They say their goodbyes as we get a glimpse of the government actually being proactive, building robots to counter Dr. Eggman's robots. Of course, however, this side of the government isn't about protecting and serving, as we'll soon find out. They're being watched by Dr. Eggman, played by Mike Block. Yes, the OG villain from the first Sonic the Hedgehog game on Sega Genesis, Dr. Robotnik, Dr. Eggman. Okay, a little backstory there. If you grew up in the 90s with Sonic at the height of its popularity, you know the bad guy was called Dr. Robotnik. But if you grew up in the 2000s, you knew him as Dr. Eggman. Believe it or not, his original name in Japan was Eggman, but when he got brought over to the US, they changed it to Robotnik because Eggman is not a threatening name in American. It was further cemented when they called him Robotnik in multiple Sonic cartoons and comics. In the 2000s, however, they decided to call him Eggman with the Sonic Adventure games. The reason for this was because Sonic's identity was changing too much with the localization. animation. The US, Japan, and even the UK had different interpretations of Sonic and his story, so the adventure games were made to streamline the continuity. I'm with the majority of US fans saying Dr. Robotnik is a much better name, and they should have just kept calling him that. I mean, we're not calling Ash Ketchum Satoshi Tajiri, despite that being his proper Japanese name. They later integrated the name change into the story. His real name is Ivo Robotnik, while Eggman is just a name Sonic called him, and Eggman decided to adopt the name despite his nemesis. With all that said though, this is one of the best takes on Dr. Eggman / Dr. Robotnik, and one of my favorites. I mean, my all-time favorite will always be the Dr. Robotnik from the original Sonic the Hedgehog animated series voiced by Jim Cummings. On the side of Eggman depictions, however, this is the best version, although Jim Carrey is coming for that title. He's also joined by his two bumbling robot minions, Boko and Deco, played by Darren Dunstan and Andrew Rannells. Darren you probably recognize as Pegasus from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Splinter from the 2003 Ninja Turtles, and Andrew played E-102 Gamma in the previous arc. If you binge all the different Sonic cartoons, you'll notice that Robotnik, or Eggman, always has two robot minions with him. These guys, Heavy and Bomb, Orbot and Cubot, Scratch and Grounder. I have no idea why they make different robot sidekicks every time, but do what you want, I guess. These two are C-3PO knockoffs though, so they just exist to be cowardly and don't contribute much. Eggman says if he gets the designs for the new robots, he can counter them, so he hacks into the government computers. He gets access and finds more than robot designs, but diary logs from his grandfather Gerald Robotnik, meaning Eggman was born in the human world. Yeah, that was always confusing to me. In the game lore, Sonic's world and our world coexist together, but in Sonic X they're doing a whole other dimensional thing. Gerald was a brilliant scientist in our world, so Eggman wants to find out more about him. He tries accessing Gerald's files, but he can't get past the password block. That is until he remembers Gerald's granddaughter, Maria. Family tree time, Gerald had two sons, one was the father of Maria, the other was the father of Eggman, so Eggman and Maria are cousins. I also like how in the story Gerald was into archaeology and science, and his sons went after those fields individually. I just thought that was a neat touch. The government finds out what Eggman is doing and tries to stop him, but Eggman is a better hacker and not only takes the files for himself, but deletes the originals on the government servers. Reading through Gerald's diary, he finds a message saying that he's completed the ultimate creature, Shadow, who will carry out his will. Now it sleeps, but one day he will awaken and unleash total destruction, so of course Eggman is going to wake him up. The president meanwhile is meeting up with Rouge the Bat, played by Kathleen Delaney. Oh boy, did this character cause some controversy with her design, but we're not going to talk about that here. Instead, the president tells Rouge that Gerald made the file 50 years ago, but since he never told anyone the password, it's been locked up until today. Guys, you didn't try his granddaughter's name? That'd be the first thing I'd try. Maybe her birthday, but then definitely her name. They all figure Eggman is behind this, and the president wants Rouge and her partner Topaz, played by Casey Rogers, to find out what Eggman is going to do with Project Shadow. Rouge and Topaz talk and figure if they bring Eggman a Chaos Emerald, he'll meet with them. We also meet Sam Speed, played by Greg Abbey, who was another minor character from Season 1, and someone who would have been much better to follow around than Chris. Greg Abbey I know as voicing Yusei and Tristan from Yu-Gi-Oh! And Raphael from the 2003 Ninja Turtles. Speaking of the wooden plank, Chris is sad, get used to that, because he doesn't like his temporary home. Back to the relevant characters, Rouge and Topaz go to where a Chaos Emerald is located and plan to steal it. We also meet Scarlett Garcia, played by Megan Hollenshed, another minor character from Season 1. Megan also voiced Mai from, you guessed it, Yu-Gi-Oh! Scarlett is pretty famous for covering the Chaos case, and she's meeting with Mr. Stewart, also played by Andrew Rannell. He's another minor character from Season 1 who is really a government agent. Mr. Stewart tells Scarlett about Project Shadow, but she's well aware of it. Her father investigated the project many years ago before he passed. Mr. Stewart says someone has kept the project a secret for many years, and that if they work together they can find out the truth. Back with Rouge, she isn't stealing a common Chaos Emerald, instead the Master Emerald, which Knuckles is not too happy about. Knuckles is played by Dan Green, who voices Yugi Moto from Yu-Gi-Oh! Dan is the best. He says the Master Emerald keeps the Chaos Emeralds under control and it can't leave, but Rouge doesn't listen and takes the emerald, along with Topaz finding the blue Chaos Emerald. Eggman, meanwhile, has broken into prison, and this is why I really like this version of the Egghead. He is having so much fun breaking into this lab and destroying everything in sight. He's the best. Eggman destroys all the inferior robots in his way and finds Project Shadow. It's a shadow creature sleeping in this machine which is 50 years old. Eggman enters the password and inserts the white Chaos Emerald, which powers up the machine, and he can't believe who walks out of the tube, bringing this episode to a close. Alright, how does this one rank? Characterization, I'm giving it 2. We don't really see much personality or character from anyone in this episode, aside from Eggman having the time of his life. To be fair, it is a setup episode, but you could have given the characters a little something more. The story is getting a 4. Saying something mysterious happened 50 years ago will always pique interest, so that makes the story fascinating, although it is weak in some spots. Entertainment gets a 4. Eggman alone makes this episode entertaining, but everything else is fun too. Importance gets a 5. This is the kickoff episode of Shadow's debut and the start of the arc. It's an important watch. Moving on to Season 2, Episode 8. We have some government soldiers transporting public enemy number 1, Sonic the Hedgehog. Sonic is played by Jason Griffith, who also voiced Atticus in Yu-Gi-Oh! GX. I think Jason does a really good job as Sonic. Not my favorite, but it is a really good depiction. They say Sonic broke into Prison Island, but he says he didn't do anything before escaping the helicopter. I like how the government in this world is completely incompetent when it comes to chasing Eggman, but when it's Sonic, they send everything in the kitchen sink at him. The president, meanwhile, is meeting up with his assistant in the limo, and she says they can't ignore what Sonic has done. The president says this doesn't sound like him, which Sam Speed agrees with. Yeah, Sam and Sonic had a big rivalry and friendship in Season 1, so he's standing up for his blue buddy. Meanwhile, it seems like Sonic broke into a museum and stole the green Chaos Emerald before taking out the robots effortlessly. This forces the president to push for Sonic to be arrested and sends even more robots his way. Chris and his family see the footage of Sonic stealing a gem, but it is super dark, so we can't be sure, and Chris is sad. Sonic is still on the run from the drones as Stuart and Scarlet visit Prison Island to get some more clues. They talk to this random guy and he shows them the dark footage of Eggman and Sonic stealing the Shadow Project. Sonic fights off more of the government robots until we finally meet the very best Sonic character, Shadow the Hedgehog. Heck yes! Shadow the Hedgehog is Sonic's best character. I'll get into why as we learn more about him, but I have a massive smile on my face every time I see him in a story. He's like the Tommy Oliver Green Ranger of Sonic. Every time Shadow shows up, the story gets a million times better. He is also played by Jason Griffith, and while he does a really good job as Sonic, he absolutely nails Shadow. He is my absolute favorite voice for this character. He just sounds so villainous and cool. There's only one aspect of Shadow I don't like. For some reason, everyone thinks Sonic and Shadow are identical, and it's kind of stupid. I'll forgive the character so far since the only times we've seen Shadow is when he was filmed in dark rooms by low quality cameras. So it's understandable they couldn't make the distinction. But in some instances when they are in clear view in broad daylight, they still get mistaken for one another. One is blue and one is red and black. It's not that hard to tell them apart. Shadow introduces himself and Sonic figures out it's been Shadow doing all these awful things. They have a race and Shadow, if you didn't know, uses these hover skates to run around, which is just awesome. Shadow gets the upper hand as Eggman flashes back to what happened on Prison Island. Shadow bowed down before Eggman and says that since he freed him, Shadow will do his bidding. Shadow shows off the green Chaos Emerald and demonstrates the power of Chaos Control. Using an emerald, he can teleport freely, and unlike Sonic, he doesn't need all 7 to access their powers. Shadow starts wailing on Sonic, but he's just playing around. He says Gerald Robotnik gave him the ability to use Chaos Control and leaves Sonic for the police. Sonic gets quickly surrounded by the cops, and Chris tells him to surrender to not make things worse. Sonic agrees when the cops mention they're going to bring him to Prison Island. They take him away as Shadow says he won't let anyone stand in his way. Eggman is super excited about Shadow defeating Sonic and getting him thrown in jail. Shadow says they still need 5 more Chaos Emeralds to activate the Eclipse Cannon so Eggman can become the master of the universe. Eggman gets a message from Rouge who wants to meet him, and when they do meet, she gives him the blue Chaos Emerald and says there are more waiting if they team up. Chris, meanwhile, is taking his family's boat to break Sonic out of jail? What? Chris, my dude, you just told Sonic to turn himself in so things don't get any worse, and now you want him out? Why did you tell him to go to jail then? Who cares about that though, because he is heading out with one of the best human characters in Sonic's history, Mr. Tanaka, also played by Darren Dunstan. Mr. Tanaka is the best. He's like a super ninja butler. It's like Alfred in his mid-20s. Mr. Tanaka might be the coolest dude on this show behind Shadow. It brings up a weird but really cool aspect of Sonic X. Aside from Chris, all the human characters are really fun, and I enjoy seeing them pop up from time to time. Even the nameless extras that get a few lines are pretty memorable, which is a huge strength for the moments between action scenes. Tails and Amy, meanwhile, also head to Prison Island to rescue Sonic in the X-Tornado, which is my favorite Tails plane. Tails is played by Amy Pallond, and Amy is played by Lisa Ortiz, who played Serenity in Yu-Gi-Oh! Tails is pretty spot on as the nervous, shy younger brother who's also a super genius. Honestly, it's kinda hard to not get this character right. Amy, meanwhile, is okay in this show. She's the stereotypical girl in the boys club hoping that everyone will be safe, and it's a tad boring, but she's alright. I much prefer the version of her from the Sonic Adventure games. There she was a super fan, madly in love with Sonic, and tried everything in her power to date or marry him. Her rage was also dialed up to 11 in those instances, which made her way more fun. Why couldn't they just keep that version? I also really like the version in Sonic Boom. I just thought she was very likable and very fun to be around. She also has a lot of great lines in that show. This episode ends with Sonic being surrounded by his true nemesis, water. It's always water. He's also locked in a cell with a bunch of science stuff on the walls, which will tie in later as the episode ends. Ratings for this one. Characterization can get a 5. Shadow is the best character, so obviously the characterization is getting a 5, and we also get some of Mr. Tanaka too, plus all the other characters showing off their personalities. The story can get a 3. The story is a little weak, with everyone just accepting Sonic as a criminal after a full season of saving the day, and there's the stuff with Chris telling Sonic to turn himself in but then going to break him out. Still, the Sonic and Shadow rivalry is building up nicely. Entertainment gets a 5. Shadow's debut fight wailing on Sonic is more than enough to boost this to a 5. Importance also gets a 5. I mean, it's Shadow's proper debut. It's kind of a must-watch for Sonic X. Moving on, we have Season 2, Episode 9. Sonic is chilling in the underwater cell as the prison warden brags about how he can't get out with all the security, and because they're on an island surrounded by water. Mr. Tanaka stops the boat he and Chris are on and explains if they go any further, the island will detect them. His solution is a paddle boat that will duck under the radar, and Mr. Tanaka, showing off how awesome he is, turns it into a jet ski because he's super fit. Eggman also arrives at Prison Island and shuts down their communications and security. The reason he's here is because Shadow said they needed all 7 Chaos Emeralds to activate the Eclipse Cannon, and there are some at Prison Island. Eggman will wreak havoc as a distraction, Shadow will blow up Prison Island by detonating their weapons center, and Rouge will break into the vault and steal the Chaos Emeralds. The military sends out robots to fight Eggman, and it is pretty cool to see Eggman in some action scenes. Normally he just has his robots do all the work. Prison Island is pretty popular today as Tails and Amy land there. Amy hugs Shadow thinking he's Sonic, which again, they don't look similar at all, but she sees the differences pretty quickly. Eggman shows up to fight Tails and Amy, and this is why I like the X-Tornado so much. It can transform into different modes, like this one with fists. While that's going on, Shadow, Rouge, and Amy all enter the prison, all going after different things as Chris and Mr. Tanaka arrive on the island. Eggman leaves because he has more important things to do as Rouge finds the red and cyan Chaos Emeralds. Shadow sets the detonator to 10 minutes as Amy gets to Sonic. Sonic says he came here on purpose so we can learn more about his lookalike, but now that Amy is here, they work together to get out. Back with Chris, Mr. Tanaka told him to stay back since it's dangerous, but because Chris is not smart, he goes up anyway. That is a big mistake because Sonic and Amy escape and meet up with Mr. Tanaka and Tails. Sonic says they need to get out of here while he finds Shadow. Rouge, meanwhile, gets the purple Chaos Emerald as Sonic and Shadow meet again. Sonic demands answers, but Shadow, being cool, says, "You'll find out," before they fight. The prison guards find out about the bomb and start evacuating, and when Mr. Tanaka goes to pick up Chris, he's not there. Chris is really a moron sometimes. Everyone leaves in droves, but the one person who can't leave is Rouge, who gets locked inside of a vault with the Chaos Emeralds. Eggman tells Shadow and Rouge he can't wait for them and leaves along with Sonic, who wants to get everyone away. Chris finds Shadow as he tells Rouge he's going back to pick up the Chaos Emeralds, not caring about Rouge at all. He uses the Chaos Emerald to teleport, but Chris, being an idiot, thinks if he can grab Shadow, he can prove Sonic's innocence. Chris holds on to Shadow as he teleports, even though a few feet away, Mr. Tanaka is right there. Sonic gets Mr. Tanaka away as Shadow meets up with Rouge. He grabs the emeralds and plans to just leave, but Chris says he has to help Sonic escape. Seeing Chris makes Shadow think of his friend Maria, so he teleports them all off the island. Now this is a bit different from the storyline in the game. Since Chris wasn't a part of that game, Shadow came back to save Rouge. Later he says he did this just to save the Chaos Emeralds, but he remembered Maria and saved her because he thought it wasn't right to leave her there. So it's pretty much the same. This episode ends with the other characters flying away, worrying that Chris may be gone. How does this one rank? Characterization can get a 3. Everyone is decent, but it's not that much of a standout compared to last time, mostly because this episode is a lot of fight scenes. Story is a 4. The story is progressing very well with more hints that Shadow has a tragic backstory, and despite Chris making dumb decisions, he doesn't slow the story down. Entertainment gets a 4. It's a very entertaining episode, not only because Sonic and Shadow are fighting again, but pretty much everyone gets in on the action. Importance also gets a 3. A little less important than the other episodes, but it's part of the arc, so you should watch it to get the full picture. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to like and subscribe because we upload videos just like this one on our Remore channel. Season 2, Episode 10. Everyone is chilling at Chris's temporary house and a news broadcast says everyone made it off the island, meaning Shadow took Chris before the place went up. Sonic runs off to search for Chris and everyone thinks if they find Eggman's base, they'll find Chris. Knuckles, meanwhile, is in a desert looking for Rouge and the Master Emerald, and he finds a fake pyramid, Eggman's base. Chris is not there though, instead he's with Shadow on the space colony Ark, which is like a second moon. Shadow explains this was created by Gerald Robotnik 50 years ago and has been kept a secret from the world. Chris asks if Shadow's related to Sonic, but Shadow just stands there, remembering what happened here. He, Maria, and Gerald were running away from the soldiers. Shadow was locked in the tube and Maria, played by Stephanie Sheh, tells him she'll always be his friend, and even though they wanted to visit the Earth together, he'll have to go on his own. Maria sent him down to Earth and Shadow promised to make all of them pay. Eggman puts the 6 Chaos Emeralds into the Eclipse Cannon and says it has enough firepower to destroy the planet. We catch up with Stuart and Scarlet trying to find someone connected to Project Shadow. They enter a rundown motel looking for a guy called Schmitz, but he's not there, and unbeknownst to them, they are being followed by these men in black suits. Eggman meanwhile broadcasts a message to the world, telling everyone to look at the moon. He activates Space Colony Arc, which blasts half the base away to reveal a massive cannon. He fires the Eclipse Cannon at the moon and destroys half of it. Everyone starts to freak out as we learn Tails has the last Chaos Emerald Eggman needs to wipe out the planet. Eggman tells the world they have 24 hours to surrender to the Eggman Empire or he will blow their planet away. Shadow tells Chris today is when things finally end, and he remembers talking with Maria. He wonders what it's like to be on planet Earth and says Gerald Robotnik created him to do something important, so Shadow thinks it has something to do with the Earth. Tails and Chris's grandpa Chuck are making alterations to the X-Tornado so he can fly into space, and Tails shows off a fake Chaos Emerald which emits the same sort of energy. He created it, but it's not as strong as the original Chaos Emerald. Sonic is still looking for Chris on the ground while also avoiding the police. While running, he bumps into Knuckles, who is in the city. What? I thought it was in the desert just now. He's fighting government robots, so Sonic jumps in to help. Mr. Tanaka, now cosplaying as Kill Bill, I love it, rides in on a motorcycle to distract them so Sonic and Tails could get away. The President and Eggman negotiate, but Eggman tells him he needs to join the Eggman Empire or else. The President tries to stall so the military could counterattack, but Eggman sees through it and gives him 12 hours to comply. Mr. Tanaka drives Sonic and friends to the desert where Knuckles saw Eggman's base. Everyone enters the base, and it turns out Topaz is there following them. They enter but encounter a locked door none of them could smash through. They all look at Knuckles and ask him to find a key since he's a treasure hunter. He doesn't want to, but is persuaded when Cream, played by Rebecca Hwine, says he is a treasure hunter but maybe not a very good one. Yeah, I haven't mentioned Cream yet, even though she's been popping up here and there, and it's mostly because she didn't have much impact on the plot. But I like her. She's not a fighter like the rest, but she's an adorable side character that exists to be cute along with her pet Cheese, a blue alien thing called a Chow. And hearing her innocent voice roast Knuckles is very funny. Knuckles grumbles as he runs into Bo Koon, also played by Andrew Rannells. Just like with Cream, Bo Koon had been popping up here and there, but nothing plot relevant, so I didn't mention him. He's another comic relief minion for Eggman, which is unnecessary. 2 was already pushing it. 3 is too much. He's a fine character though, and he tells Knuckles to leave, but Knuckles walks past him because Bo Koon is a joke in the show. Bo Koon does have a super robot called the Egg Golem, which is this huge stone guardian, and Knuckles tricks him into opening the door. He and Sonic work together to topple the giant, but Bo Koon, actually being smart, takes a hostage in the form of Topaz, telling them to back off. He gets back to stupid pretty quickly though, as instead of being on top of his giant robot, he's on the ground. Since he's basically a toddler, Cream and Mr. Tanaka just take the remote away from him. They turn the Egg Golem on Bo Koon and tell him to chase him down, forcing the henchman to run through the desert trying to stay alive. Okay, that was pretty funny. Mr. Tanaka too. He rescues Topaz and she is very much in love with him. Tails flies to the base and lands the X-Tornado inside, reuniting with everyone. He tells everyone he adapted the X-Tornado to go into space, but Amy points out it only seats 4, and if he's bringing Chris back, only 2 of them can go along. Fortunately, Eggman had a spare spaceship lying around. How does he have this much money? Topaz offers to stay with Cream and Cheese, and wait, why did you guys bring them along on this dangerous mission? The squad of Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Amy, and Mr. Tanaka take the spaceship with the X-Tornado and blast off into space, ending the episode. How does this one rank? Characterization gets a 5. Everyone is great in this episode, even the minor characters who don't do that much like Cream and the President. Story gets a 3. It's a decent story to get everyone up in space with the action here or there, but it's not as compelling as what we've seen. Entertainment gets a 2. I mean, I am having fun, it's just less Shadow really brings it down. That's not to say it isn't entertaining, but the big conflict is the characters fighting Bo Koon. There's not that much struggle there. Importance gets a 3. It isn't super important to the arc, it's another episode that acts as a setup to more important stories, but for the full experience you should watch. Alright, penultimate episode, Season 2, Episode 11. Stuart and Scarlett arrive at a retirement home where they find Schmitz, played by Richard Hollifer. He doesn't want to speak to them, especially about what happened on the Space Colony Arc 50 years ago. Schmitz warns them not to look into this because it stirs up trouble, but Scarlett is desperate to learn the truth. Schmitz is the only one left who knows what really happened up there. Everyone else is dead, including her father. Stuart pulls her back though because he sees this is bringing up painful memories for Schmitz. While this is going on, Sonic and friends fly through space and Rouge tricks Eggman into giving her the password to the space colony to intercept them. She starts hacking and finds the files on Project Shadow and wonders who Shadow really is. Stuart and Scarlett leave the retirement home but run into these guys wearing the black suits. Stuart tells Scarlett to get in the car as he shows off how cool he is by beating up the bad guys off screen. Yeah, this is 4 kids rearing their ugly heads and I have to call them out on this. They have been pretty tame on cutting out fight scenes, but there are some instances where it was clearly cut down and that hurts the product. Mistranslations and changing speech is one thing, but cutting out footage of people punching each other is too much. One of the goons grabs Scarlet, but Schmitz shows up and karate chops the dude in the back of the head. Sonic and friends get close to the space colony, but Knuckles grabs the wheel once he feels the Master Emerald is on the station, almost killing them as they crash into the base. Yeah, I like Knuckles a lot, but I always forget he's kinda dumb. Knuckles goes off on his own and finds the Master Emerald, but Rouge is there to intercept him, and they fight. Rouge almost falls off the side, but Knuckles grabs her and pulls her up. Dude, I know you were acting on instinct, but she can fly. Rouge thinks he was trying to be fresh and walks off, saying she doesn't care about the Master Emerald anymore. Knuckles takes the emerald as Tails walks the X-Tornado through the base with the team. Tails tells Sonic if they insert his fake Chaos Emerald into the space colony, it would cause a reaction and fry the Eclipse Cannon. Unfortunately for them, Eggman was waiting and captures Amy, demanding the Chaos Emerald. Next, we have a stupid moment on everyone's part. Sonic walks forward to give him the fake Chaos Emerald, and Eggman traps him in a cage which will launch him into space. You're probably thinking, well, I guess Eggman figured out it was fake. But he didn't, because Tails, being a moron, blurts out it's fake, which shocks Eggman. What was your plan, dude? You need that Chaos Emerald, so why would you try to get rid of it along with Sonic? And why would Tails just blurt out it's fake? This made more sense in the game. There, Eggman already found out there was a fake Chaos Emerald and set this up to trick Tails into revealing which one it was. Why didn't we just do that here? Sonic says everything's okay as his friends start to cry, and he tells Tails it's up to him to stop the cannon. Eggman launches Sonic into space and blows up the canister, seemingly killing him. Shadow tells Chris that Sonic is dead, which freaks him out. Everyone is sad, but Tails dries his tears and goes to fight Eggman as Mr. Tanaka gets Amy away. Meanwhile, Schmitz opens up about what really happened 50 years ago on the Space Colony Ark. He doesn't explain the whole story, but this is a good chance to clear it up because it is a bit confusing. It's because a bunch of other people told the story, and with 4 kids' mistranslations, it makes the story even harder to follow. For a full history, Gerald Robotnik and his team of scientists were on the Space Colony Ark. Gerald designed the thing for scientists to work in peace when they were approached by the United Nations, the world government, and the Guardian Unit of Nations, GUN. GUN simply wanted Gerald to make weapons for them, but he didn't want to do that. He was a pacifist. He wanted to build things to help humanity. Gerald was a good man who wanted to help the world, but he changed his mind because of Maria. His granddaughter Maria was suffering from a disease called neuroimmune deficiency syndrome, which left her frail and weak. The zero gravity on the Ark helped, but it wasn't a permanent solution. Gerald thought if he found the secret to immortality, he could help Maria. His idea was to create the ultimate life form, something that wouldn't get sick or die, then use that DNA to help Maria. He also had to hide the fact he was looking for a cure and made it look like he was building a weapon to keep Gun off his back, and let him keep the Space Colony Ark. Gerald, in addition to being a scientist, was also an archaeologist, fascinated by the Echidna drawings and ruins. Gerald found the Chaos Emeralds and used their powers to create life. He was inspired by the drawings of chaos from several ruins and created a prototype, but it didn't work out. Gerald took inspiration from a hedgehog drawing and created Shadow, the ultimate life form. What was different was Gerald based Shadow's soul on Maria, so he would be a good person at heart no matter what. Shadow wasn't complete yet though. Gerald needed more time to study him and finish his work, and in that time Shadow and Maria became close friends, dreaming about going to the Earth together. Gerald would have finished Shadow 2 if it wasn't for Gun. Gun, who is like the corrupt military division, made the United Nations think Gerald was creating an ultimate weapon to use against them. They did this so that they could get the green light to stop the research, but they had a different objective. Gun wanted to take Shadow for themselves and use it as a weapon at their discretion, and they had a screwed up plan to take it. Their plan was simple: go up to the Space Colony Ark and kill everyone related to Project Shadow. From there, they would take Shadow and Gerald for themselves and blame Gerald for the deaths, labeling the thing as a biohazard outbreak. They arrived at the station and did everything I said, Gun telling the soldiers they were protecting the world from evil scientists and monsters. Gerald was determined to save Maria and Shadow, so he sent them to the escape pods. Shadow tried to fight, but because he wasn't finished, he was too weak. Maria carried him to the escape pods and loaded him in when Schmitz arrived. Think about this from his perspective. Based on the lies Gun told him, he thinks Maria is about to unleash a monster onto planet Earth, which is why he demands she not pull that lever. Maria doesn't listen and pulls the lever, which gets her shot. They don't show it, thankfully, but seeing Schmitz's face and how he cries, this is clearly haunted him his whole life. He says he only joined the military because he wanted to protect the world and give back, but Gun used him and so many others to further their own agendas. Now in the dub, Classic 4 Kids here makes it so he didn't shoot her. Instead, they took her back to Earth, but this is one instance where it works both ways. Maria had a disease that is killing her, and the zero gravity was the only thing that stabilized her condition. So forcing her back to Earth to die a slow and painful death is just as bad. I mean, I prefer Maria being shot because it's more dramatic, but it's still gut-wrenching. Of course, that's not the end of the story. I'll talk about that later, but for now, Scarlet comforts Schmitz and thanks him for telling the truth, despite the risks that Gun might kill him. Back on the Ark, Knuckles is running through the space colony with the Master Emerald when Sonic teleports in front of him. Sonic explains that after seeing Shadow use Chaos Control, he figured he can do the same and did so with the fake Chaos Emerald. Sonic says he's going to put the fake emerald in the Eclipse cannon while Knuckles reunites with the others. Rouge meanwhile is copying all the data about Project Shadow and admits to Topaz even Eggman doesn't know the whole story. Rouge plans on getting the Chaos Emeralds before she leaves, but Shadow arrives to tell her hands off. Shadow calls her a phony, but Rouge says he's not the real deal either. She shows off that the original creature was sealed off years ago, which Shadow confirms, saying it was a prototype. Rouge then mentions there were 2 capsules ejected from the space colony when the raid happened, but they were never found, so how did Shadow end up on Prison Island? All of this implies that Shadow's memories are fake, that he's a clone and these memories are fabrications made by someone, but sorry to say they're not. Continuing the story explanation, Maria shot the 2 capsules down to Earth. One of them was supposed to be for her, and the other had Shadow inside. Gunn found Shadow and brought it to Gerald so he can finish working on it. This clone, false memory nonsense was to explain how Shadow died at the end of his game and came back, but it made things more complicated, so they retcon that later. Tails is beating down Eggman and thinks he's won, but Eggman takes the yellow Chaos Emerald out of the X-Tornado at the last moment. Eggman calls Shadow and tells him to stop the intruders from getting to the Eclipse cannon. Shadow starts to walk off even as Rouge says he's not the real Shadow. He says even if his memories are fake, he will do what he must. He will keep his promise to Maria. Knuckles finds Chris and they reunite with Tails, Amy, and Mr. Tanaka. Sonic and Shadow face off and they race, with Shadow this time asking Sonic who he is since he's now unsure of himself. The fight is pretty intense with blasts and spike balls. Their fight is causing damage to the cannon, but Eggman doesn't care and loads the final Chaos Emerald inside to fire at the Earth. The cannon doesn't fire, however. Instead, the station goes dark and half the screens turn to a timer, 27 minutes and 53 seconds. The other screens show Gerald Robotnik chained to a chair. Gerald says the countdown to his revenge on this world has begun. In a few minutes, Space Colony Ark will crash into the Earth, killing everyone. Alright, this is one of the best episodes in this whole arc. How does it rank? Characterization gets a 5. Everyone is really strong in this episode. Tails, Sonic, Shadow, everyone is a standout with their own cool character moment. The story is getting a 6. The story just picked up in a big way. Not only do we get a full backstory of what happened on the space colony, but the current storyline picked up in a massive way. Sonic's fake out death, Tails fighting back against Eggman, and the cliffhanger ending saying the world is about to end. Entertainment gets a 6. Everything in this is so good. The climactic fights are amazing. Sonic and Shadow, Eggman and Tails, Knuckles and Rouge. It's all so epic. Importance gets a 5. We finally get the backstory of what happened on the Space Colony Ark, and it's a satisfying reveal, even though 4Kids heavily edited the story. And here we are, the finale to this arc, Season 2, Episode 12. Sonic and Shadow continue their fight as the Space Colony Ark starts to shake. This is a good time to mention something I like about their rivalry. Sonic has never beaten Shadow. Throughout all their races and fights, it's either been Shadow coming out with the dub or ending in a tie, showing that Shadow is the ultimate life form and no one can take him on head to head. Plus, it's not like Sonic is inferior to Shadow or anything like that. They both have their strengths and weaknesses, and Sonic has beaten enemies Shadow couldn't beat, so it balances out. Shadow leaves as the other characters meet up with Eggman, helpless to watch as the Chaos Emeralds get transported elsewhere. The message from Gerald continues, saying they have no time to escape or survive. Since their leaders took Maria from him, he's destroying everything they care about. Alright, let's finish the backstory. After the Space Colony Ark was shut down, the United Nations labeled what happened there as a biohazard accident, and put all of the blame on Gerald Robotnik. Gunn brought Gerald to Prison Island, recovered Shadow, and forced the scientists to finish his creation. They wanted Shadow to be a weapon, but after Gerald learned of Maria's death, he went insane. Gerald played along and made it look like he was finishing Shadow, when in reality he was crafting his ultimate revenge against humanity. He created a program for the space colony. When the Chaos Emeralds were inserted into the cannon, which was designed to destroy asteroids, they would propel the station to Earth. It would cause mass devastation, killing everyone on the planet. He did finish Shadow, but also rewrote his memories, so Shadow would be the weapon Gunn wanted him to be and execute Gerald's plans. Now Shadow remembers Maria being gunned down and the people of Earth responsible. Gunn figured out Gerald's plan and decided to shut everything down, seal the creature away, and kill Gerald. From there, Gerald was executed by firing squad, which is why we see him chained up in a prison cell giving a speech. It was his last words before he died. And that is the full story of Shadow's backstory. I mean, there's also Gerald making a deal with the Demon Lord, but don't worry about that. What an awesome backstory for a dark variant of the main character. It is so in-depth and so emotional, making it one of the best hidden backstories ever. This is why Shadow has stuck around for so many different iterations of Sonic, while other new characters have faded from people's memories. Throughout Sonic's journey, from the first Genesis game to Sonic Adventure 2, he found friends, happiness, whereas Shadow only found pain and loss. Because at their core, Sonic and Shadow are very much alike. If things turned out differently, Sonic would be just like Shadow. Rouge rolls in to join everyone and says the computers are locked so they can't change course, and Eggman doesn't like this because he'll die too. Sonic rolls in saying if they all work together they could fix this. Eggman shows everyone Gerald's diary explaining his motivation, which I already told you about. Meanwhile, Topaz and the police find the black suit guys and arrest them. Turns out they were members of Gun, doing everything they could to keep their involvement in Project Shadow under wraps. They wanted to distance their involvement in all the horrible things they did, but when Eggman accessed the file which Rouge gave Topaz, they had all the proof they needed to bring them in, along with Schmidt's confession. Eggman explains to everyone that the Chaos Emeralds are feeding energy into the Ark and it is going to detonate the whole thing. The blast will be more massive than a supernova, and they're also what's pushing the Ark towards the Earth. They all turn to Knuckles because with the Master Emerald he can use it to shut off the power from the Chaos Emeralds. Everyone agrees to work together to save the planet and themselves. Eggman, Tails, and Rouge all fend off the robot defenses as Sonic, Knuckles, and Eggman's robots bring the Master Emerald to where the Chaos Emeralds are. Mr. Tanaka, Chris, and Amy meanwhile have stayed back since they would just be in the way. Mr. Tanaka assures Chris and Amy they'll get there in time, but Shadow arrives and says they will fail. Yeah, Shadow knew about the Ark and Gerald's plans the whole time, so he was playing Eggman to finish the thing. Chris begs Shadow to save everyone since he thinks Shadow doesn't want to hurt people, that deep down he was made to help others, but Shadow tells him to back off, hitting Chris. Shadow says he made a promise to avenge Maria, but Chris says revenge won't help anything, and he can't blame everyone today for what a group of people did 50 years ago. Shadow tells him to shut up, that back then Maria was his only friend, but Gunn sent soldiers to kill her. He says he tried to stop them, but because he was incomplete, he couldn't, and he never saw Maria again. All Maria wanted was to visit Earth, but she never got that chance. Chris tells him that not everyone on the planet is bad, most of the people are good, and that Maria would want Shadow to be friends with people. Shadow, after hearing this, remembers what Maria told him as she died, that she wants Shadow to be happy and make friends on Earth. She says that even though Earth is beautiful, the people have to face many problems. That's why Shadow was created, to help others. In the Sonic Adventure game, Chris wasn't the one reaching out because he didn't exist. It was Amy who reached out to Shadow asking for help, but the effect is still the same. Shadow remembers who Maria wanted him to be and realizes what he has to do. Sonic, Knuckles, and the Goofbots arrive to this altar room where the Chaos Emeralds are held, and they are guarded by the Bio Lizard. They don't explain what this thing is in the episode for some reason, but this was the prototype Shadow mentioned earlier. Gerald designed it based on the drawings of Chaos he found. Good foreshadowing by the anime because we saw scientists experimenting on the lizards in a previous episode. In the past, the Gun soldiers tried to kill the Bio Lizard, who looks awesome by the way, but since it's a monster and immortal like Shadow, they instead locked it up on the Ark. Shadow arrives, man he is fast, and he tells Sonic that he will distract the Bio Lizard while Sonic grabs the Chaos Emeralds. He jumps into action and fights the Bio Lizard, and it's super cool of course. Sonic's team make it to the top of the tower, and Knuckles uses the Master Emerald to stop the Chaos Emeralds as Shadow beats the Bio Lizard. Shadow's big brother is not done yet, however, because since it's basically the same as Shadow, it can also use Chaos Control. So it teleports to the outside of the Ark and starts pulling the space colony to Earth himself, which is just awesome. Even more awesome though is when Sonic and Shadow use the Chaos Emeralds to become Super Sonic and Super Shadow. Everyone on Earth starts to panic but notice Sonic and Shadow fighting the space colony. They all root for them to succeed. The fight is pretty intense and has some of the best animation in the entire arc, as Sonic and Shadow use all their powers to stop the space colony from coming any closer to Earth. The only thing missing from this sequence in Sonic X is of course Live and Learn. Live and Learn by Crush 40 was the song that played during the final climactic space battle from Sonic Adventure 2. It was such an iconic song, backing arguably the best Sonic final boss fight in the character's history. So not having it during this final sequence just feels wrong. Put Live and Learn in the background while you watch to make this better. Shadow, thinking of Maria's last request, understands what he has to do. He takes off his golden bands that had been on his wrist the whole time, which unleashes his full untapped power. While Gerald was testing Shadow's abilities, he noticed he was too strong, so he created those rings to seal his greater power so he had more control. Shadow goes all out, along with Sonic, to use Chaos Control and teleports the space colony back to its original position. While leaving, Eggman tells the Sonic team that he looked up to his grandfather and wanted to be a great scientist just like him, but it was wrong to try and destroy the planet because he wants to conquer it and establish his empire. Yeah, nothing changes with this guy. The ending is bittersweet, however, as when Sonic returns, Shadow is nowhere to be seen. He gave his life to stop the space colony from crashing into the Ark. Rouge also thinks that maybe Gerald wanted Shadow to stop his plan all along. Think about it, Gerald copied his granddaughter's soul and gave it to Shadow, so that even at his worst, Shadow deep down is a good person. Sorry to ruin the emotional moment, but Shadow survived, obviously. He used up all his energy and Eggman rescued him when he went out into space just now. And he would be back for Season 3. Fun fact though, in the original game, Shadow was supposed to die, but the game and character were so popular they had to bring Shadow back. They did in Sonic Heroes with the insinuation this was a clone, but that was quickly retconned with the Eggman rescue in Shadow the Hedgehog. The Shadow story arc ends with Sonic looking at the same view Shadow looked at every day, while saying goodbye to his dark counterpart and going home with his friends. How does the final episode of the Shadow arc rank? Characterization, I'm giving a 6. The standout is obviously Shadow, but everyone, even Chris, is useful and shows off their characters, working off each other great. Plus with the extra characterization of Gerald going mad with grief. The story gets a 6. We finally get the full circle moment with Shadow realizing his true mission to protect the world, and the struggle to stop the space colony is great. Entertainment is getting a 7. Seeing 2 super hedgehogs alone would have been enough to put this at a 5, but teleporting the massive space colony in addition to all the other great fights in this boosts this to a 7. Importance also gets a 5. This is the big conclusion of the arc, and this finale had ramifications going into the rest of Sonic X. It is a must-watch for Sonic fans. So what happened after this? Well, Sonic X wrapped up its second season with everyone going back to Sonic's world, and season 3 was good, wrapping up all the Sonic X storylines. Sonic X is one of the greatest Sonic shows of all time, and we got many more Sonic TV shows, movies, and games after that. Sonic is in a very good place right now, which is impressive for something that's been around for more than 30 years. As for Shadow, he was so popular he returned in Sonic Heroes and then started his own video game that you either love or hate depending on what you like. There he fought demons, which is a can of worm for another day, and he has cemented himself as one of Sonic's most popular characters. So much so the third big budget Sonic movie is all about him, played by John Wick himself, Keanu Reeves. That's all I have for you today. Thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed, and I'll see you all later.